So now we've created our edit smoothie component right here. The next thing we need to do is query the database to find a record which has this as its slug, and then we need to display this data on the page so that we can maybe edit that data. So since we'll be using the database now inside this component, let's open up the component, edit smoothie. We'll need to import it up here. So we'll import db from, and it's at /firebase /init, that file we made earlier. So we're importing that database now and we can use it. Now, at what point do we want to go out and grab this data? Well, a good place to always get data is in the created method. So let's do that. Let's create that lifecycle hook called created, which runs when the component is created but not yet rendered to the DOM. And what we'd like to do in here is go out and get that data. Now, how are we going to do this? Well, first of all, what I'll do is store the reference to this particular thing, this document we want to get, in a variable. Now, I'm going to do this in a local variable. So I'll say let ref equal to db.collection. We want to look into the Smoothies collection. And then how do we get a document now? Now, before, when we wanted a single document, we said .doc, and then we passed through an ID right here. But this time around, we don't have an ID. We only have the slug. We don't know what the ID of this particular smoothie is right here. So we can't really do this. And we can only say .doc to get the document if we have the ID. So we need to use a different method. Now, we know what the slug is, right? And the slug is stored in our data. So if I refresh over here, we're going to see that data. And we can see we have a slug property on it. So what we could do is look through our data and say, okay, well, get me the documents which have the slug of Mario Madness, for example, or get me the document which has a slug of Morning Mood. So let's do that. To do that, we use a method called .where. So we're saying, okay, get a reference to the db.collection smoothies .where the document has a property equal to something. So this where method takes three parameters. The first is the property inside the records that are stored in this collection that we want to check or query. So that property is called the slug. So we'll say slug, like so. Now, the second parameter is the evaluation parameter. Do we want to check if the value of the slug property is greater than something, or less than, or equal to? Well, we want to see if it's equal to the slug that we have right here, the smoothie slug. So we pass through the equal operator, and it's double equal because a single equal in JavaScript is the assignment operator and a double equal is a comparison operator. So we're saying we want the slug on our record to be equal to something. The third parameter is, what do we want this to be equal to? Well, we want it to be equal to this thing right here, the smoothie slug. So we can grab all of that, copy it and paste it down here. We don't need it in quotations, like so. So now we're saying, okay, get me inside the Smoothies collection the documents where the slug is equal to this thing right here, which is the slug from the URL. So that's going to look into our collection and find that and give us a reference to that, which is what we're storing inside this variable. So to actually go and retrieve that, we need to say ref.get, like so. Remember, that's how we actually get the data, right? So now we're getting that, and this is an asynchronous task. It takes time to do. It returns a promise. Therefore, we can say .then and fire a function when it's done inside this method. Now, this method will take the snapshot as a parameter, much like we did before when we got all of the records from a collection. It takes a snapshot to represent what is returned. And this snapshot is a collection of items. Now, we're only expecting one item, but it's still stored in a collection. So inside this function, what we can do is cycle through this collection using for each. So we'll say snapshot.forEach, and then for each iteration around, we'll fire a function and take that individual document. So we'll get the doc and open up a function. And inside here, what we'll do is just console.log the doc, and then the data from that document. Remember, we say .data, which is a function to get the actual data from the document, the field stored inside it. So let's save this now and go over to this screen again. I'm going to open up our console so that we can see if anything's logged to the console. We can see right now there's an object, and if we open that up, we see the ingredients, the slug, and the title. So we've successfully gone out and we've grabbed that data, right? Based on this thing right here, we've said go out, grab a reference to any document in the Smoothies collection which has this slug. Then we've cycled through those documents, and for each one, what we've done is output the object right here. Now, of course, there's only one with this slug, which is why we're only outputting one object. So then, we don't just want to log it to the console. Instead, what we'd like to do is say, okay, well, I want you to take this document and then add it to some data in our component. So first of all, let's make a data property called smoothie. This is where we'll store the smoothie that we retrieve back here. To begin with, we set it as null. But once we've retrieved it, what we'll do is update that property. So we'll say this.smoothie to grab this thing right here, this smoothie property, and then set it equal to doc.data, the stuff that we retrieve here. We also want to attach the ID to this smoothie object here. And remember, it's not stored in the data. It's actually a property on the document itself. So we can say this.smoothie.id. So we're adding on an ID property to this thing now. And we'll set that equal to doc.id. Okay? So now we have that data that we retrieve here stored inside this smoothie. So whatever the slug is at the top, we're grabbing that, querying the database, getting that record, and then pushing that record onto this object. So now that record is essentially stored inside this property in our data. Okay, so now we have that data. What we could do is output it to the screen. So let's now, instead of outputting all this stuff, we'll say edit, and then we want to output smoothie.title. So we're grabbing the title property from this smoothie right here. And then we'll place smoothie after that. So if we save this now and check this out in a browser, we should see enter Mario Madness smoothie. Cool. Now we do get an error. And it says, cannot read property title of null. So right here, it cannot read this property when it first renders to the DOM. And of course, when it first renders to the DOM, this yet might not have completed because this takes some time to do. So until it's completed, we're trying to render the title of this thing, and it doesn't have a title property yet until we get that data back. So what we need to do is say, okay, we'll only output this stuff right here if we have a title property on the smoothie. So we know how to conditionally output something. We can use v-if. So I'll say v-if and set that equal to something. Now, if this in here is true, then it's going to output. If it's false, then it's not going to output. So we can say, okay, well, if smoothie, then we want to output something, because if this is null, then this will be false because null is a falsy value. Therefore, it won't show. If this gets updated down here, once we receive that information back, that document back from the database, then this will have a proper value not equal to null. That would be a truthy value. So this would be true and it would show then. So then we're never trying to get the title of null because we're only ever outputting this if we have a smoothie available to us. So let's save that and check this out again. Hopefully we don't get an error now. I'll refresh it just to see in the console. And nope, we don't get an error, which is really cool. We just get edit Mario Madness smoothie. So now we have access to this smoothie inside the component. What we can do is start to output the data of that smoothie into a form onto this component so that then we can maybe edit that data and update it. And we'll start that in the next video.